Hello, welcome to Lessons for Life. In today's episode, we will talk more about change. We have talked a lot about change in past videos, including the 4 different stages of the attitude towards change, how we grow from one stage to another, and eventually or ideally we should be people who are proactively changing in order to become better, in order to learn and grow. At least the hope is, even if we are not yet changing proactively, we should at least respond, or we should change reactively when we are faced with challenge. In other words, we react to challenges by changing ourselves instead of blaming ourselves, or instead of blaming others for our misfortune. Now, if or once we arrive at that stage where we are open to change in response to challenges, we need to know what is it that we need to change, right? So today's discussion is going to center around what is it about ourselves that we need to change. Have you ever thought of how we experience this world around us and choose how to respond to the various stimuli? I'm sure all of you are aware that we experience our world through our 5 senses, or 5 sensory organs. We see, we hear, we smell, we taste, and we feel by touch. Once we experience the world through these 5 senses, we actually process the stimuli that we experience. How do we process this? What does it mean to process, right? Once we experience, we don't necessarily take in everything that we experience through our sensory organs. We select. That's the first stage of processing the stimuli around us. We ignore some. We don't even notice some out of habit, yeah? So we only select some to internalize and process. And after we select, a process of evaluating the new experience against our past experiences happens, right? We regard it, we evaluate it, and we interpret it, we try to understand, yeah? And once we've done this with this experience, we check whether there is any frame of reference from past experience where we already have a compartment or a space in our brain to store this experience, to attach this experience to. In other words, if we already have a frame or a compartment in our brain, just like your storage cabinet at home, then we organize this experience by putting it into that compartment, and that frame, okay, that defines the space of that compartment, defines how we respond to this new experience. Okay? Now, once we have assessed and organized it, we have a method on how to respond to this new experience, or an experience based on how we relate it to a previous experience. This frame of reference, okay, the frame where we attach this new experience after assessing it, or after evaluating it, and then deciding that this is worth processing, and then we interpret it, we give it some regard, and then we understand it, and then we put it into that existing frame. Or we build a new frame for this experience because it is novel and we do not have an existing frame of reference or space to place this new experience. Now, this frame of reference is our perception. Okay, so we have perceptions about a lot of things. Perceptions are actually fed by beliefs. Okay, so we grow up copying perceptions that belong to our primary caretakers or parents or elders or other influential people around us. We cannot see perception because it is not a concrete object. But what we can see is other people's behavior, their responses to certain experience, how they talk, how they act, how they display emotion. People display emotion through their actions and their words, right? So we observe this and then we infer that this is the perception that is guiding this behavior, and we develop our own perception based on this modeling. Okay, some of these perceptions or frame of reference that we have is correct, luckily, if the elders around us, the more influential, the people who exert more influence on us that existed in our circle, modeled it correctly for us. But sometimes the perception that we inferred from these role models and made into our own, is disempowering. So changing is about examining these perceptions, our frame of reference. Try to recall an experience when you were a child and perhaps you were sitting in a parent's car or some other elder person's car as they were driving, and another driver shouts out profanities at your role model, and you're in the car watching this whole episode, and you view that the role model in your person's life is totally unperturbed and indifferent to that entire episode. Then your young mind is taking in this stimuli, you're observing, and then you perceive it by processing it, okay, because it's interesting to you, it's something new, so you select it, you analyze it, you evaluate it, and you try to interpret and understand so that you can build a frame for your own perception, for your own reference. You try to build a frame of reference, okay, to form your own perception. So what happens at this moment is, maybe on the contrary, the earlier example was that this adult or your role model just was totally indifferent, calm, continued, or even maybe they made a small mistake which irked the other driver. They forgot to turn on their indicator as they were changing lane, perhaps. But they were calm. They did not get angry, okay? They did not shout out words of worse quality to that person. They were calm and they just waved their hand to indicate that they're sorry and went on with driving on their lane. Okay, so your young mind is observing this and creating a frame of reference, and in future, when you see such behavior, you will keep observing other responses from other role models, and you will start evaluating, and you will develop your own frame of reference, and from this frame of reference comes your perception, which you will use in other situations. Now, hidden behind, or the perception itself, hidden behind the perception are your beliefs, or in other words, your perceptions are feeding on or are rooted in your beliefs. So again, like the perception that existed in the mind of your role model that led to a particular response from them in less than ideal situation, yeah, in a challenging situation. There are also beliefs which are invisible. So perception and beliefs are both invisible. What's visible is the response in a given context. So as a young person observing the responses, yeah, actions and words, you infer upon the perception, and you also create a belief or your own value statement that then strengthens, concretizes this perception further. So this is what happens. So it is important to remember that when we are trying to change, it is our perception that we need to change, and in order to change this perception, we have to work a step further and change our belief or our value. Now, when we examine our perception, we know exactly what it is. It could be a statement like, oh, if somebody treats me with disrespect, I have to show them who I am. I will not be a pushover. Okay? That could be the perception that you have in your mind, which then leads to you responding by shouting worse profanities at the person who shouted at you in the first place. Right? I'm just giving you this example. Right? It could be many other things. Or on the contrary, your perception, if time and again all you saw from your role models, yeah, was time and again a behavior whereby they never were irked by this behavior and they continued to be indifferent, drove on calmly, sometimes smiling sweetly, or just ignoring or being indifferent, or sometimes even waving a gentle gesture of apology. Yeah, if you keep seeing this over and over again, then you develop your perception, which is a frame of reference, which is also rooted in a belief or value. Okay, and this frame of reference and the value could sound like, well, it does not matter. I am a person who's always calm. I'm sweet and gentle, and I'm not easily disturbed. I'm able to regulate my emotions, and such uncouth behavior around me does not draw me out into an ugly battle. Yeah, so this could be your value statement and your frame of reference, which is your perception. So whenever you realize that you're facing challenges, you have to examine your perception. And you have to change your perception. And taking a step further, you have to change your belief or your value system. And remember, in a past video, I talked about changing proactively before facing a challenge. This can only happen if you can now set out to find out what are the universal rules that govern life, all life. Okay, because there are universal rules governing the life of all living beings in this universe, and also non-living beings. And once we are aware of these universal principles, then we can examine our beliefs by juxtaposing our beliefs or values against these universal principles and realigning our values to these universal principles, because then our values feed our frame of reference or our perception, and once our perception is sorted out, we are good to go. This is how we arrive at being able to change proactively even before a challenge emerges in our life. I hope this video was useful. Leave your comment in the comment section. See you again in another video. Bye bye.